The Prowler, Part 16, the finale. I awoke quite sad this morning. I'm very family-oriented, and having killed my brother is bothering me so. I've protected that simple bastard all our lives, from wee pants up till recently, when I disposed of his charlatan of a wife. I fought for my family. It's the most important. But it is not my fault for what happened. What a secretive bastard my brother turned out to be. As I laid in my bed, staring up at the ceiling, someone rapped lightly on my chamber door. I told whatever soul that stood outside to quickly enter or be gone, for I hadn't the time for such foolishness this early in the morning. The door slowly opened, and it was Father that stood before me, standing there as if he were bewitched by the devil himself. His head hung low when the words escaped his lips. "Nigel is dead. Your brother's body was found in an alleyway in Whitechapel." I sat up quick in my bed, feigning my surprise. "Not Nigel! Not my brother! How could something like this happen? Who perpetrated this foul deed, Father? I must know!" I shouted in a form of faux outrage. He stood in front of my bed, continued in his shocked state. They found a poem on his person. He is the latest victim of the Prowler," he mumbled dishearteningly. "No, Father! Not that bastard, the Prowler!" I screamed out in outrage, once again showing off my exquisite acting skills. My father stood there and wept, weeping like a wee babe. The once booming-voiced strong man, tyrant at times, reduced to a blubbering child. The weakness turned me ill, all the while feeling a touch of sadness inside, my only victim I felt anything for. I helped Father back to his chambers to get some rest and to calm my nerves from his tearful emotions. I then proceeded down to the breakfast table for some much-needed coffee and the morning paper. As I sat down at the table, I noticed a letter from the London Journal sitting atop the paper. It was a letter from Parker Johns, expressing his condolences of my brother's demise, and a request for an interview. Normally, I would tell the prick to jog on, but I think an interview is perfect. He's last on my list, and this is a perfect way for me to get close to him. I shall set up an interview with him for later in the evening, along with my love Lady Smith, where we will inform him we have big news to reveal, which is our wedding announcement. Then, when the time is right, we dispose of the bastard. I took a sip of coffee and unfolded the paper, and of course I made the headlines. West End Police Commissioner found slain in Whitechapel, claimed by the Prowler. Shocking news to report, dear readers. West End Police Commissioner Nigel Burlington was found slain in the Whitechapel district of London. That's Ripper territory, but surprisingly, he was murdered by the West End Prowler. His calling card poem was found atop of the body. Sad times for the community and for the Burlington family, which has already been through enough tragedy these recent weeks. The family has not spoken yet of this recent tragedy, but I'm hoping to speak to someone from the family in the near future. As they grieve, however, we grieve with them as a community and as a nation. On behalf of the London Journal, we would like to express our deepest condolences to the Burlington family. I must pose two questions, however. that we may never know the answers to. What was Police Commissioner Burlington doing traversing the back alleys of Whitechapel? Was he following a lead of some sort on the Prowler, or possibly the Ripper? And what was the Prowler doing on the East End? That's not his territory. Like I said, 2 interesting questions to think about. Until tomorrow, dear readers, stay safe out there. I sat the paper down in annoyance. Yes, 2 questions that sadly won't be answered. Not in my lifetime, anyway. It sickens me not being able to take the credit for disposing of Jack the Ripper. But once again, I had to put my family's well-being first and cover up my brother's extracurricular activities. The shock would have just been too much for Father, and would have cast a dark shadow over my family's good and ancient name. Hopefully, when I'm long dead and buried, someone will find this journal and discover and credit my slaying of Jack the Ripper. I finished eating breakfast, then headed back to my chambers to get changed and begin my day. I sent word to Parker Johns and set up our interview for 8 o'clock sharp at my love Lady Smith's manor. A promise of a newsworthy announcement and a lavish dinner further sealed the deal, plus an agreement from myself to answer any question posed to me, no matter how personal, also sealed the deal. He was of course shocked I agreed to such terms, but he doesn't know I plan on removing his head before the evening is through. I spent the hours before this evening's affair making sure my blade was cleansed and in fine working condition, and then I spent a few hours toiling in my secret study, reading up on some demonology and how to conjure up a demon. I have my eye on a particular foul-smelling fellow that should be a pure delight to summon back to this putrid earth. I was so enthralled with the ancient text that I almost misplaced the time. I quickly dressed in my evening best and hastily made my way to Smith Manor, for the hour was approaching. A half-hour later, I was standing on my love's front step, rapping on her door. I was on time and had arrived before Mr. Johns. I was ushered inside and led to the parlor, where my bride was waiting for me, sitting at a table that was set up for our interview. Adorned with the finest eats and drinks, the evening was catered perfectly, and the table was immaculate, made even more so by my love's radiant beauty, that put a perfect finishing touch on this catered affair. Everything was in place to put Mr. Johns at ease. As we waited for his arrival, we hatched our plan to dispose of him once and for all. And since he was taking his sweet time getting here, we were able to plan it out to the very last detail. No shocker, of course, that someone as smug as him would show up late to a gathering with 2 members of nobility and a beautiful evening such as this. Is there a man more deserving of being killed than him? I think not. And it's what was coursing through my mind as the prick scampered in like a wee schoolgirl 20 minutes late. He sat down and apologized for his tardiness, but the disrespect was already committed. We of course acted as if we accepted his apology and told him everything was fine, continuing to ensure his comfort. He sat down and we began our meal and interview. He began with asking the news we had to share, and we informed him of our engagement and upcoming nuptials. He congratulated us and said the uniting of two historic families would do the city and country some good during these trying times. An escape, if you will, from this prowler business. I smiled at him and said, "But of course, you are quite right, my good sir." May I say, during this part of the conversation, I was thinking of nothing more than ripping his entrails from his frail body. I cannot stand this pompous, grotesque bastard. He then quickly turned the conversation into more personal, familial affairs, asking about the numerous tragedies that have occurred at our stately manor and on estate grounds. I turned to my love while his head was down and nodded in her direction, putting our plan in motion. She excused herself from the table to go check on the status of the main course of our meal, and I began to answer his questions. Yes, there have been horrible tragedies that have befelled my family and home, I started, but there was nothing that could be done about those events, for we were unbeknownst marked by the Prowler. I said in a somber tone. Yes, I've always wondered how was it that the Prowler always seemed to be around and move about freely on your family's estate, almost as if he lived there, he said in a smug, condescending tone. Just then my love emerged from the back with the servants, bringing out the main course. Well, Mr. Johns, I have a perfect explanation for that, I said as the plates were being placed in front of us. Before I continued, I looked at my love, and she grinned and winked at me, confirming she had completed her task. Mr. Johns then looked at me as he shoveled a forkful of lobster into his gullet and said, "Please continue, Lord Burlington. You were saying—" "Yes, as I was saying, there's a perfect explanation for that, and that explanation is because he does," I said in a sinister tone. Mr. John's eyes widened and said, "Excuse me, Lord Burlington, what was it that you just said?" "You heard me, you smug bastard. The Prowler does live on the estate, and the Prowler is me." He began to choke. "Tell me, Mr. Johns, are you enjoying the garlic butter on your steak, or the clarified butter with your lobster?" "What's that, Mr. Johns? I can't hear you. You're choking." "That's because we added an extra ingredient to your food. Poison," I said sinisterly. He began to convulse and choke on the vomit and blood that began to expel from his mouth. He writhed in his chair, and when he began to make too much noise, I grabbed the fork that was to my right, then jammed it into his eyeball. He then fell forward, dead, as his head hit the table. Finally, I've been ridden of this tabloid miscreant. I sat there and felt a sense of relief wash over my body as my love gave me a kiss. We then finished our meal as we enjoyed our macabre celebration. I wrapped Mr. Johns in the tablecloth to prevent him from bleeding out on my love's fine rug. As we finished our evening, I kissed my love good night and quickly got Mr. John's body out of the mansion before Mr. Smith discovered what we had done. I carried him to the carriage and threw him in, and we were on our way. As I rode off, I couldn't help but think of how much stronger me and my love's bond has grown over these past few days and nights, and after these past few murders. She has helped me unbelievably, doing away with the scum that has tormented me so, and for that I will be forever grateful. I will forever love her. On my way back home, I dropped Mr. John's body on the side of the street, near his home. Thankfully, unseen and unheard, as there wasn't a soul out. Before leaving, I placed my poem on his body and made my way home. Once I arrived back to the manor, I quickly made my way to my chambers, for I was tired. Before going to bed, I sat down at my writing desk and wrote one last letter to the papers. I did not announce my retirement, for I'll let the bastards of this city and the world live in a constant fear of when I might strike next. They will forever fear of what lurks in the shadows as they walk down the streets, always look upon their neighbors with a hesitant gaze, not knowing if they could be the prowler that stalks the streets. I will forever be remembered. To whomever finds this journal, whichever generation of this family, take great pride in the fact that you are related to the Prowler. Don't let the simple bastards say otherwise. I caused sheer panic at the end of the 19th century. London quivered at the thought of my name. I could never be caught. The simple bastards couldn't do it. The murders only stopped because I allowed them to stop. I'm the bringer of death, the menace that stalked the shadows, the most deadly thing that stalked these streets since the Black Death centuries earlier. I shall never be forgotten. I, however, gave up my murderous pursuits for my family's well-being and excellent reputation. That's the most important thing, and whoever finds this, remember that. Most importantly, however, I stopped for my love, Lady Smith, who will now be Lady Burlington. We are to start a family. I have to stop the bloodshed, so I must end it, and I did it for love. This was the final entry from the Prowler's journal. There were other things written by Neville Burlington, but nothing ever again as the Prowler. The final letter he talked about writing at the end of the entry, if you're curious, read as follows. I have just killed again, and I'm sorry to inform you it's your very own paper's filth peddler, Parker Johns. By the time you read and publish this letter, his body will have been discovered, and you will see how I finish my latest masterpiece. A word to the wise. You best publish this letter, or I will be paying a visit to the heads of the London Journal. Publish this letter so that the people know I am the Merchant of Death, and at any moment I could pay them a visit. Take a breath when you walk down the street, for you never know when I might strike next. I am the Prowler, and it does not matter who you are or where you reside, for when I decide it's your time, then I shall pay you a visit. This was the last thing Lord Burlington did as the Prowler. It is known as the Merchant of Death letter, or the Pay You a Visit letter. It left the West End and London as a whole in a state of fear for the years that followed. As I said earlier when this started, the finding of this journal after a century of dormancy sent a shock wave through the realm and even the world. Experts and fans alike of serial killers were also left stunned at the revelation of the identities of the Prowler and Jack the Ripper, two individuals people searched the identities for decades and never thought would be discovered. Also, finally revealed in this earth-shattering discovery is the reasonings of both killers' abrupt ends to their killing sprees. We finally now know why Jack the Ripper stopped killing and why the West End Prowler stopped. Also, understandably shocked are the remaining members of the Burlington family, especially the present Earl of Burlington. This has been quite the scandal. Neville II, the 12th Earl of Burlington, who is the great-great-grandson and named after his now notorious grandfather, is taking all of this news extremely hard. There have been rumors of many other disturbing things found. The Prowler's black bag, still containing his instruments of death, the famous cloak and top hat, and the location of his secret chambers, which will be searched shortly. That's been the latest in the news recently. The Prowler's secret chamber revelation. All the news companies will be there when they crack the seal, hoping to find more macabre artifacts, like his occult book collection, possibly his preserved trophy collection, but most of all, find a clue, if any, to his untimely death. You see, not much is known of Lord Burlington's, the Prowler's, death. He died just a few short years after his last Prowler journal entry. His last known business, where we know he was alive, was his trip to America. He was alive when he got on the ship. He went there supposedly on family business to start up a few factories and mills, but the rumors persist that he went to New York specifically to acquire an ancient book on demonology. We don't know if he died in the States and his body was brought back, or if he died shortly after he returned home. Ship's logs report he was on the return voyage home as passenger, not cargo, but when the ship returned to English shores, there were no reports or sightings of the Earl's arrival, just his wife, Lady Smith Burlington. She was seen receiving bags of luggage and an elongated box, almost coffin shape. Only she knows of her husband's fate. Her journals have been discovered, along with her husband's regular journals, and they will be sorted and searched to try and find the answer. Speaking of Lady Smith Burlington, this earth-shattering discovery did not only reveal her husband's identity as the Prowler, but also revealed her involvement in his last few murders, information that shocked people the most, especially the reputation she had as a caring person and that of a fine lady of the realm. She lived a long, eventful life, caring for and raising their children and keeping the family strong and powerful with her business acumen. She never remarried, but was one of the most powerful, influential socialites of the realm. This is all why people are so shocked the most. Lady Smith Burlington, a murderer, a poisoner, an accomplice in her husband's murderous endeavors. It's simply unbelievable. Her journals and books have also been discovered and are eagerly waiting to be looked into, along with countless other items. There's still so many things to discover and look through, especially with the upcoming search through the Prowler's secret chamber and Lady Smith Burlington's personal journals. I'm sure I'll be back, talking about the latest revelations of Lord Burlington, the Prowler, and his murderous love, Lady Smith Burlington's newest, deadly secrets. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.